Hey guys, tonight we're taking a deep dive into what many consider one of ancient Rome's greatest achievements, the public baths. Forget the pristine, marble-clad images you might have in your head from movies. We're going to peel back the layers of grandeur and reveal the disturbing secrets of ancient Roman baths. Imagine yourself stepping into a vast, echoing hall, filled with steam, the roar of hundreds of voices, and the distinct, somewhat unsettling smell of, well, a lot of unwashed bodies and something else entirely. Sounds like a relaxing spa day. Right. The Romans might have bathed daily. But here's the cheeky reality check if you were a Roman bathgoer. You probably won't survive this. At least, not without catching something. Losing your wallet, or seeing something you really wish you hadn't. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your first shock upon entering a Roman bath complex wouldn't be the sheer size or architectural marvels, but the profound difference in what constituted hygiene for the ancients. Leading directly to unhygienic practices, shared scrapers, unclean water, forget fresh towels and personal loofahs. Sanitation in these communal spaces was, by modern standards, disturbingly lax, making a clean bath anything but. Imagine you've entered the apoditerium, the changing room. You undress, and then the real process begins. The primary method of cleaning wasn't soap and water as we know it, but rather a practice that might make your stomach churn shared scrapers, or strigils. A strigil was a curved metal or bone tool, shaped like a blunt letter J, used to scrape off sweat, dirt, and oil from the body. You'd apply olive oil to your skin, let the grime adhere, and then, often with the help of an attendant, perhaps a slave, you'd literally scrape it all off. Imagine sharing a communal tongue scraper, but for your entire body, and it's been used by dozens, if not hundreds, of other sweaty, grimy people before you. Sometimes, a common strigil would be passed around, or you'd use one that had simply been left by a previous user, perhaps given a cursory wipe. And then there's the unclean water. While Roman aqueducts brought vast quantities of fresh water into the cities and into the baths, the sheer volume of bathers meant that the pools, especially the cooler ones, quickly became murky and contaminated. Imagine hundreds, perhaps thousands, of people immersing themselves in the same water over the course of a day. This water would be laden with skin flakes, hair, dirt, sweat, and whatever else might have been scraped off bodies or simply washed off. It wasn't constantly drained and refilled. That would be too costly and time-consuming. Instead, it was refreshed periodically, meaning you were often bathing in what was essentially communal bodily soup by the end of the day. The warmer pools, the caldarium, might have been slightly better due to the heat, which could inhibit some bacterial growth. But the frigidarium cold plunge could become particularly unsanitary. You're essentially soaking in a giant, lukewarm petri dish, blissfully unaware of the microscopic party happening around you. This complete lack of understanding of germ theory meant that while Romans valued cleanliness, their methods often worked against them, potentially facilitating the spread of various ailments rather than preventing them. Their idea of clean was simply removing visible dirt, not invisible pathogens. One mainstream historical fact that highlights this is the widespread archaeological discovery of strigils in bath complexes across the Roman Empire. These personal hygiene tools are consistently found, confirming their central role in the Roman bathing ritual. Regardless of the accompanying communal hygiene issues, a particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Roman writers suggest that the scrapings from the bodies of gladiator, mixed with other substances, were sometimes collected and sold as a supposed medicinal ointment or aphrodisiac. A truly disturbing thought. Imagine using ancient, sweaty body grime as a beauty product. It adds a whole new level of you to the concept of recycling. Historians still argue whether the perceived health benefits of Roman bathing, which were widely believed at the time, genuinely outweighed the hygiene risks posed by communal practices and shared water. Or if the baths, despite their sophisticated engineering, were actually significant vectors for disease transmission, were they healthy, or just really good at spreading germs regardless? Your first dip into a Roman bath was a plunge into a communal soup of questionable hygiene, where the concept of clean was a far cry from what you might imagine. So, your first dip into a Roman bath was a plunge into a communal soup of questionable hygiene, but beyond the murky water and shared scrapers. Another aspect of bath culture would strike you as truly shocking by modern sensibilities: public nudity and social mixing. No segregation. All classes together. Forget private changing rooms or designated areas. Roman baths were sprawling, uninhibited spaces where people from all walks of life, often completely unclothed, mingled freely. Imagine the scene. As you move from the apoditerium changing room to the various heated rooms, you'd quickly realize that clothes were optional, or rather, generally absent. Nudity was the norm, not just for men, but often for women as well, especially in earlier periods or in smaller, less formal baths. This wasn't a private, intimate experience. It was a public spectacle of the human form. In all its varied states, imagine walking into a vast public space where everyone around you is completely naked, casually going about their business, striking up conversations, and conducting transactions. It's like a permanent, very crowded nudist beach, but with more steam and less sand. The lack of strict segregation was astounding. While some larger baths eventually implemented separate hours or designated sections for men and women, this wasn't always the case, particularly in smaller, neighborhood baths, even when there was some separation. The atmosphere was still incredibly open and uninhibited. The sheer casualness of the nudity, combined with the communal nature of the pools and exercise areas, would be a stark cultural contrast. And then there was the radical notion that all classes mixed together. The baths were largely democratic spaces, open to rich and poor, slave and free, patrician and plebeian alike, while the wealthy might have personal attendant slaves, of course, to scrape their skin or carry their towels. Everyone shared the same pools, the same steam rooms, and the same facilities. Imagine a senator rubbing shoulders literally, perhaps with a common laborer, a wealthy merchant chatting with a freedman, all of them stark naked, discussing politics or the price of bread. It's like a very unusual networking event where everyone is completely exposed. And social status is, for a moment, stripped away with their clothes. This social mixing meant that the baths were vibrant hubs of Roman life. People conducted business, discussed philosophy, gossiped, made political alliances, and even arranged marriages. They were places of both leisure and serious interaction, where the naked truth of society was laid bare. However, this lack of segregation also contributed to some of the disturbing secrets we'll uncover later, particularly regarding crime and unwanted advances. The very openness that made them democratic also made them vulnerable. One mainstream historical fact that supports this public nudity and social mixing is the explicit accounts by Roman authors like Seneca the Younger, who vividly describes the cacophony and diverse clientele of the public baths, including freedmen, slaves, and athletes, all sharing the same space. While Seneca complains about the noise, his descriptions confirm the widespread public nature of these naked interactions. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Roman satirists occasionally poked fun at the idea of overly effeminate men who spent too much time at the baths, or those who were overly concerned with their appearance there, suggesting that even in an era of public nudity, there were still unspoken social codes and judgments about how one presented oneself. Imagine being roasted by a Roman comedian for having too many abs, or not enough. It's a testament to human vanity. Even in the ancient world, historians still argue whether the lack of segregation and widespread public nudity in Roman baths primarily fostered a sense of social equality and communal spirit, or if it also contributed to rampant indecency, sexual promiscuity, and a breakdown of traditional moral boundaries. Did it build community, or just chaos regardless? Stepping into a Roman bath was an immediate immersion into a world of uninhibited social mixing and casual nudity, forcing you to shed not just your clothes, but many of your modern inhibitions. So, stepping into a Roman bath was an immediate immersion into a world of uninhibited social mixing and casual nudity. But once you were in this bustling, exposed environment, you'd quickly discover that relaxation was a distant dream, thanks to the overwhelming noise and crowd's constant din. Overwhelming atmosphere. Forget a serene spa experience. Roman baths were vibrant, often chaotic, hubs of activity, filled with a cacophony of sounds that would make a modern-day shopping mall on Black Friday feel like a quiet library. Imagine the sheer volume. The baths were immense structures, often covering several acres, designed to accommodate thousands of people simultaneously. The sheer number of bathers meant that quiet contemplation was simply impossible. You'd be surrounded by hundreds, perhaps thousands, of other bodies, all engaged in various activities. It's like trying to relax in the middle of a massive, echoing sports arena during a particularly rowdy game, but everyone is naked and splashing. The constant din would be assaulting your ears from every direction. Seneca the Younger, a Roman philosopher, famously complained about the noise emanating from the baths below his apartment. He described a bewildering array of sounds: the clanking of weights from the exercise yard, the grunts and groans of men exercising, the shouts of masseurs administering vigorous rubs, the shrill cries of a hair plucker, the splash of bodies hitting the water, the excited shouts of ball players, the argumentative tones of a pickpocket caught in the act, and the general hubbub of countless conversations. Imagine trying to read a book or meditate with all of that happening simultaneously, amplified by the vast, echoing stone architecture. You'd need noise-canceling headphones, which, sadly, hadn't been invented yet. The overwhelming atmosphere wasn't just auditory, visually. It would be a blur of motion, steam, and naked bodies. The air would be thick with humidity, the smells of olive oil, sweat, and perhaps less pleasant odors, the sheer density of people bumping into each other, jostling for space in the pools or changing areas, would contribute to a sense of controlled chaos. It's a sensory overload in every possible way. This constant stimulation meant that the baths were places for social interaction, for seeing and being seen, rather than for quiet solitude. If you wanted to relax, you had to learn to tune out the world around you, a skill that most likely came only with prolonged exposure. This chaotic atmosphere also facilitated some of the less savory activities that occurred in the baths, as the sheer density of people and the constant noise could provide cover for illicit dealings. Theft, or unwanted advances, which we'll delve into later. The very thing that made them lively also made them a fertile ground for disorder. One mainstream historical fact that supports the intense noise and crowding is Seneca the Younger's detailed and exasperated account in his Moral Letters to Lucilius Letter 56, where he bemoans the relentless noise from the public baths below his lodging. Providing vivid descriptions of the specific sounds he heard, this primary source offers direct evidence of the overwhelming auditory environment. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Roman bath complexes, especially the larger imperial ones, occasionally featured areas where poets would recite their works or rhetoricians would practice their speeches, adding another layer to the already bewildering acoustic landscape. Imagine trying to enjoy a hot soak while someone is loudly declaiming epic poetry right next to you. It's like a very unusual, very loud open mic night. Historians still argue whether the constant noise and crowds in Roman baths primarily contributed to a vibrant, dynamic social environment that fostered public discourse and community, or if they often created an uncomfortable, stressful experience that detracted from genuine relaxation and hygiene. Did they build community, or just chaos regardless? Entering a Roman bath was a sensory assault, an immediate immersion into a world of booming echoes and countless voices, making true peace and quiet a fleeting, almost impossible dream. So, entering a Roman bath was a sensory assault, making true peace and quiet an impossible dream. But beyond the noise and questionable hygiene, these communal pools held a far more insidious danger, bringing us to disease transmission waterborne illnesses, skin conditions. Forget sanitized water filters or rigorous health codes. Roman baths, despite their grand appearance, were often unwitting breeding grounds for a horrifying array of pathogens, turning a simple cleansing ritual into a significant health risk. Imagine the water, which you now know was not frequently changed, teeming with microscopic life as hundreds, then thousands, of people immersed themselves daily. The water in the caldarium, tepidarium, and especially the cooler frigidarium became a veritable soup of bacteria, viruses, and parasites. It's like swimming in a giant, public, unchlorinated bathtub that everyone in the city shares. You are literally bathing in other people's biological effluvia. Waterborne illnesses were a constant threat. Dysentery, caused by fecal contamination, could spread rapidly, leading to debilitating diarrhea and dehydration. Typhoid fever, another waterborne bacterial infection, would bring high fevers, headaches, and systemic illness. Imagine the gut-wrenching cramps and sudden fevers striking you down days after a seemingly refreshing swim. There were no antibiotics, no modern diagnostic tools. These illnesses often meant prolonged suffering or death, beyond internal ailments. Skin conditions were rampant. Fungal infections like ringworm and athlete's foot would spread easily in the warm, moist, communal environment. Bacterial infections, from minor skin irritations to more serious boils and impetigo, could be transmitted through direct contact or shared surfaces. Imagine stepping out of the bath with a fresh, itchy rash, or developing a painful skin lesion days later, knowing it probably came from that communal dip. It's enough to make you itch just thinking about it. Even more serious conditions could be transmitted. Eye infections, trachoma for instance, could spread through contaminated water or shared towels, while direct evidence for specific STDs in baths is debated. The environment, combined with other activities which we'll touch on later, certainly provided opportunities for transmission. The Romans had no concept of germ theory. They believed that illness was caused by imbalances of humors, bad air miasma or divine displeasure, therefore, their hygiene practices, while aimed at cleanliness, completely miss the crucial point of preventing microbial spread. The shared strigils, the communal pools, the lack of effective disinfection, all contributed to making the baths a perfect incubator for disease. One mainstream historical fact that supports the potential for disease transmission is the high rates of various infectious diseases documented in ancient Rome, including dysentery and skin ailments, which would have found ideal conditions for spread in communal, unsanitized environments like the public baths, while direct causal links are hard to prove definitively for every outbreak. The epidemiological principles are clear. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Roman medical texts advocated for rinsing the mouth with urine as a tooth whitener or mouthwash, a practice that, if carried out near or in the bath areas, would have only added to the already dubious hygiene of the water supply. Imagine someone gargling with that next to you in the pool. It gives a whole new meaning to Golden Age. Historians still argue whether the overall health benefits derived from the physical exercise and social interaction at the Roman baths largely offset the risks of disease transmission, or if they primarily served as significant public health hazards, inadvertently contributing to the spread of common ailments and epidemics. Were they a net positive, or a public health nightmare regardless? Every splash and every shared moment in a Roman bath was a silent gamble against invisible pathogens, turning your quest for cleanliness into an unwitting exposure to countless microscopic threats. So, every splash in a Roman bath was a silent gamble against invisible pathogens. But while the water itself posed a threat, another disturbing aspect of the bath complex reveals how fundamentally different ancient hygiene practices were from our own, bringing us to toilets and waste disposal communal latrines. Poor sanitation. Forget private cubicles and flush systems. Roman bath complexes often featured communal, open-plan latrines, where the very act of answering nature's call was a surprisingly public and unsanitary affair. Imagine needing to use the facilities within a grand Roman bath. You wouldn't find a discrete row of individual stalls. Instead, you'd enter a long room with a continuous stone bench running along the walls, featuring a series of keyhole-shaped openings cut into it. Underneath these openings, a channel of running water, often from the bath's overflow, flowed. Carrying waste away, it's like using a public restroom where everyone is sitting side by side on one long bench, chatting. With no dividers whatsoever, your concept of personal space would be completely shattered. These were communal latrines, often open to the air, or at least open to the large hall where they were located. Privacy was non-existent. You would sit next to dozens of other bathers, engaging in polite conversation, discussing philosophy, or gossiping about the latest gladiatorial games, all while performing a very private bodily function. Imagine trying to have a serious conversation about your business dealings with a colleague, while both of you are, well, occupied. It certainly breaks down social barriers, if nothing else. And the method of cleaning yourself after using the latrine forget toilet paper, you would likely use a xylospongium, a sponge on a stick. This sponge was usually shared among bathers, cleaned, or rather, rinsed in the running water channel in front of the seats. Imagine using a communal toilet brush for personal hygiene. It's certainly efficient. In a horrifying sort of way, the overall poor sanitation extended beyond the latrines themselves. While the Romans were famous for their aqueducts and sewer systems, the sheer volume of waste from thousands of daily bathers, combined with the continuous flow of water through these open channels, meant that the air in and around the latrines was often thick with unpleasant odors. Despite the running water, the channels could get clogged, and splashes were inevitable. The concept of hand-washing with soap after using the toilet was not widespread, meaning people carried germs from the latrines back into the bathing areas. This juxtaposition of grand architecture and surprisingly primitive, unsanitary waste disposal methods reveals a fundamental difference in ancient understanding of public health. Their engineering feats were impressive, but their knowledge of microbial transmission was non-existent. One mainstream historical fact that supports the existence of these communal latrines is the archaeological preservation of numerous Roman public latrines, particularly famously at Ostia Antica and the baths of Caracalla, which clearly show the long, open benches and shared water channels, confirming their communal and open-plan design. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Roman latrines would occasionally have small niches or shelves next to each seat, not for personal items, but where wealthy Romans might keep their own personal xylospongium rather than using the communal one. Imagine your ancient status symbol being your very own, unshared, sponge on a stick. It's a very humble form of luxury. Historians still argue whether the continuous flow of water in Roman latrines, despite their communal nature, primarily helped to carry away waste and prevent major buildups, thus providing a somewhat effective sanitation system. Or if the lack of privacy and shared cleaning implements actually facilitated the rapid spread of infections and parasites among bathers. Were they sophisticated for their time, or just superficially clean? Regardless, your visit to a Roman bath meant confronting a very public, very unglamorous aspect of ancient life, where even going to the toilet was a communal spectacle of questionable hygiene. So, your visit to a Roman bath meant confronting a very public, very unglamorous aspect of ancient life. But the open, bustling nature of these complexes, combined with the presence of so many people and their valuables, also made them a magnet for another, far more insidious threat, leading to crime and theft pickpockets, robbery, shady dealings. Forget a peaceful soak. The Roman baths were notorious hotspots for various illicit activities. Turning your relaxing outing into a potential financial disaster, imagine the sheer number of people constantly moving through the complex. Hundreds, even thousands, would be present at any given time, milling between the changing rooms, exercise areas, pools, and various other facilities. This dense, often chaotic environment provided the perfect cover for opportunistic criminals. It's like a perpetually crowded, dimly lit festival where everyone has taken off their clothes, and there's no security camera in sight. Pickpockets were a pervasive nuisance, with people undressing and leaving their belongings in communal apoditeria, changing rooms, or unguarded niches. Their wallets, marsupial jewelry, and other valuables were easy targets. You might hang your clothes, containing your coins, on a peg, and when you returned, find your purse gone. Imagine coming out of a refreshing dip, feeling great, only to realize you've been completely cleaned out. This was a common occurrence, so much so that Roman writers frequently warned about it. Beyond petty theft, more organized robbery could occur, especially in larger baths or those with less oversight. Sometimes, groups of criminals would work together, distracting a bather while an accomplice snatched their belongings. There were even instances of balneari furors, bath thieves, a specific term for criminals specializing in bathhouse larceny. Imagine someone literally running off with your entire bundle of clothes, leaving you naked and stranded. That's a very bad day at the spa. And then there were the shady dealings. The baths, being public and relatively anonymous spaces where people from all social strata mingled, became convenient meeting points for all sorts of clandestine activities. Gambling, which we'll discuss later, illicit transactions, secret rendezvous, And even the planning of more serious crimes could occur amidst the steam and splashing, the noise and crowds that we talked about earlier, which made relaxation difficult. Ironically, provided the perfect cover for these illicit goings-on. It's like a very active dark web marketplace, but in real life, and everyone is sweaty. While large imperial baths might have some form of official oversight, the sheer scale of the complexes made comprehensive security a challenge. You were largely responsible for safeguarding your own valuables, often resorting to keeping them close, or entrusting them to a loyal slave if you had one. One mainstream historical fact that supports the prevalence of crime in Roman baths is the discovery of numerous lid cursi tablets depictiones found in Roman bathhouses, on which individuals would inscribe curses against bath thieves, sometimes even detailing the stolen items and invoking gods to punish the culprits. This archaeological evidence directly confirms that theft was a significant and common problem. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Roman bath complexes reportedly employed a specific type of slave known as a capsarius, whose job it was to guard bathers' clothes and valuables in the apoditerium, suggesting that the threat of theft was so high that a dedicated security role was needed just for your locker. Imagine having to pay someone just to watch your clothes while you shower. It's a sad commentary on the trustworthiness of the average Roman bathgoer. Historians still argue whether the high incidence of crime in Roman baths primarily stemmed from the inherent anonymity and lack of strict security in crowded public spaces, or if it was exacerbated by the social mixing that brought together individuals of vastly different economic statuses, creating tempting opportunities for the less fortunate. Was it chaos or class clash regardless? Your quest for cleanliness in a Roman bath was also a constant exercise in vigilance, as the threat of losing your valuables loomed large amidst the steam and the crowds. So, your quest for cleanliness in a Roman bath was a constant exercise in vigilance against crime. But beyond simply bathing and exercising, the baths were complete social centers, and that meant people were doing what people always do in social centers: food and drink snacks. Drunkenness. Vomiting. Forget a quiet sip of herbal tea. The Roman baths were often bustling with vendors and patrons consuming various refreshments, which sometimes led to less than charming displays of overindulgence and its unpleasant consequences. Imagine the atmosphere. You'd find vendors roaming the bath complex, hawking a variety of snacks. These could include anything from simple bread, cheese, and olives to more elaborate pastries, sausages, and fruit. You'd need fuel for all that scraping and socializing. After all, imagine a modern-day concession stand, but it's roaming around a public bath. And the menu is strictly ancient Roman. But it wasn't just healthy snacks. Drink flowed freely as well. Wine, often diluted with water, was a common refreshment. While not everyone was drinking heavily, the presence of alcohol in a relaxed, communal environment certainly set the stage for merriment. And sometimes, for excess. Imagine trying to unwind after a long day, and a tipsy patron starts telling you their life story, very loudly, in the caldarium. This combination of food, drink, and a relaxed atmosphere inevitably led to instances of drunkenness. People would overindulge, their inhibitions lowered by the wine and the communal spirit. You might witness boisterous arguments, inappropriate behavior, or simply overly loud laughter from intoxicated bathers. It's like a happy hour that never ends. But everyone is naked, sweaty, and probably a bit too loud. And where there's drunkenness, unfortunately, there's sometimes vomiting, whether from too much wine, too much food, or simply the combined effects of heat, exertion, and a weak stomach. It wasn't uncommon for bathers to relieve themselves in a less than dignified manner, While slaves would have been on hand to clean up messes, the sheer volume of people and the casual nature of consumption meant that the occasional unpleasant incident was almost inevitable. Imagine trying to enjoy your refreshing cool-down dip, and then you spot a truly unpleasant floating object. That's a bath secret you definitely didn't want to discover. This aspect of bath life highlights their multifaceted nature. They were not just places for hygiene, but for full-blown social and leisure activities, embracing all the good, bad, and sometimes disgusting aspects of human revelry. They were truly microcosms of Roman society. One mainstream historical fact that supports the presence of food and drink is the archaeological evidence of kitchens, food stalls, and even tavern-like spaces integrated into larger Roman bath complexes, such as the baths of Caracalla and Diocletian. These findings confirm that dining and drinking were integral parts of the bath experience, not just external activities. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Roman sources hint at special bath cakes or pastries, perhaps sweetened with honey and nuts, that were popular treats consumed by bathers. Offering a small indulgence amidst the otherwise rigorous bathing routine, imagine a sort of ancient, savory donut that you could grab after your workout. It sounds almost appealing, until you remember the communal sponge. Historians still argue whether the availability of food and drink in Roman baths primarily enhanced the social and recreational aspects, drawing more people to utilize these public facilities, or if it contributed to a less hygienic environment and fostered undesirable behaviors like excessive drinking and public indecency. Did it add to the experience, or just create more mess regardless? Your Roman bath visit was not just about getting clean, it was a full sensory experience, complete with the sights, sounds, and occasionally unpleasant consequences of communal eating and drinking. So, your Roman bath visit was a full sensory experience, complete with the sometimes unpleasant consequences of communal eating and drinking, but in a place where people from all social strata mingled naked and uninhibited. Another, more intimate, and often disturbing aspect of Roman bath life comes into focus: sexual encounters, prostitution. Unwanted advances, forget serene, chaste cleansing, the sheer openness and anonymity of the baths, combined with a different set of social norms, made them places where illicit sexual activity, and even exploitation, were not uncommon. Imagine the sheer volume and proximity of naked bodies. As we've discussed, segregation between sexes was not always strict, or even existent. In all baths, particularly earlier or smaller ones, even in baths with separate facilities or hours, the atmosphere of casual nudity and social freedom could blur boundaries. It's like a massive, unchaperoned party where everyone is a little too comfortable, and there are no rules about personal space. Prostitution was an undeniable presence in and around the Roman baths. Public bath complexes, with their constant flow of people, their private alcoves, and their general air of leisure and indulgence, were convenient locations for sex workers to solicit clients. Some prostitutes might even operate directly within the bath complex, particularly in less reputable establishments or specific areas within larger ones. Imagine trying to enjoy a quiet swim and realizing you're witnessing commercial transactions of a very different kind beyond overt prostitution. The general atmosphere could lead to unwanted advances. With so many people, many of them intoxicated, in a state of undress, it was a fertile ground for lewd remarks, inappropriate touching, and persistent solicitations. Individuals seeking casual encounters or exploiting vulnerabilities would find ample opportunity. Imagine trying to simply exist in a public space where you might constantly be subjected to uncomfortable stares or direct, unwelcome propositions. The power dynamics of Roman society, particularly the widespread presence of slaves, also played a disturbing role. Slaves, both male and female, who worked in the baths or who attended their masters, were highly vulnerable to sexual exploitation and abuse. Their lack of legal rights meant they had little recourse against forced sexual encounters, while Roman moralists often railed against the perceived promiscuity of the baths. Their continued popularity suggests that these activities were, if not universally accepted, at least widely tolerated within the broader societal context. The baths were, for many, a place where social constraints could be loosened, sometimes with liberating and sometimes with deeply unsettling results. One mainstream historical fact that supports the prevalence of sexual activity and prostitution in Roman baths is the explicit condemnation of such activities by various Roman moralizing authors, like Seneca and Martial, who frequently lament the alleged moral decay and promiscuity found within bath complexes. While their writings are moralistic, their complaints directly confirm that such behaviors were widespread enough to be a public concern. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some archaeological finds within bath complexes include small, engraved phallic amulets or lamps, which, while sometimes associated with fertility and good luck, could also hint at the sexualized atmosphere of certain areas within the baths. Imagine finding a little good luck charm that looks suspiciously inappropriate. It certainly tells a story about the kind of luck some people were seeking. Historians still argue whether the sexual activities in Roman baths primarily represented a genuine expression of a more sexually liberal Roman society, or if they were largely confined to specific areas and types of baths, and were primarily a sign of moral degradation condemned by the elite. Were they spaces of freedom, or just depravity regardless? Your visit to a Roman bath meant navigating a complex social landscape where the pursuit of cleanliness often intersected uncomfortably with the presence of overt sexuality, making it a space of both public display and private indulgence. So, your visit to a Roman bath meant navigating a complex social landscape where cleanliness often intersected uncomfortably with overt sexuality, but beneath the layers of luxury and leisure. The grand Roman baths relied on a dark, ever-present foundation of forced labor, bringing us to slavery and servitude labor, personal attendance, exploitation. Forget automated systems or paid staff. The very functioning of these immense complexes, from heating the water to scraping a bather's skin, depended entirely on the tireless, often brutalized, work of enslaved individuals. Imagine the sheer scale of operations. To heat the vast quantities of water for the caldarium hot room and tepidarium warm room, massive furnaces prefernia had to be continuously stoked, day and night. This grueling, dangerous work, feeding enormous fires with wood, was performed by enslaved laborers. Imagine toiling in stifling heat and smoke, constantly shoveling fuel for hours on end, knowing that the comfort of hundreds of bathers depended on your unceasing effort. It's like being a permanent, unpaid human furnace shoveler. Beyond the manual labor, enslaved individuals filled a myriad of roles as personal attendants. If you were a wealthy Roman, you would bring your own slaves to the baths. They would carry your towels, watch over your valuables, though as we know, even that was no guarantee against theft. Apply olive oil to your skin, and, most importantly, wield the strigil to scrape off your sweat and dirt. Imagine lying there, utterly relaxed, while another human being, who has no choice in the matter, meticulously scrapes your body clean. Other enslaved people worked directly for the bath complex itself. They would clean the pools periodically. Of course, sweep the floors, empty the communal latrines, a truly unenviable task, and generally maintain the vast facilities. They were the invisible workforce that made the Roman bathing experience possible, enduring the unpleasant smells, the constant noise, and the often thankless tasks. The inherent reality of exploitation was undeniable. These enslaved individuals had no rights. They could be bought, sold, punished, and even sexually abused by their owners or by patrons of the baths. With little or no legal recourse, their long hours, difficult working conditions, and lack of freedom underscore the stark reality that the leisure and luxury enjoyed by Roman citizens were built directly on the suffering of countless others. While a wealthy Roman might treat their personal slaves with some degree of paternalism, the general atmosphere of the baths, where slaves were simply part of the background, performing menial tasks for the comfort of others, highlights their dehumanized status in society. Their presence was so ubiquitous that it rarely warranted comment from Roman writers, simply a given. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates this reliance on slave labor is the design of the Roman hypocaust system, the underfloor heating method for the baths. This complex engineering marvel required constant stoking of furnaces, an arduous and continuous task typically performed by enslaved laborers, whose existence was essential for the system's operation. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Roman sources refer to specific enslaved bath attendants who were particularly skilled at massage or hair removal, often using painful methods like resin or tweezers, becoming quite sought after for their services by discerning bathers. Imagine being renowned for your ability to expertly pull out body hair. As your entire life's purpose, it's a very specific and somewhat disturbing form of ancient fame. Historians still argue whether the widespread reliance on slave labor in Roman baths primarily allowed for the vast scale and accessibility of these public facilities, making them a cornerstone of Roman social life, or if the inherent brutality and exploitation of this system undermined any claims of Roman civilization and progress. Did it enable greatness, or expose barbarism regardless? Beneath the gleaming marble and rushing water of a Roman bath lay the unseen, silent suffering of enslaved individuals, whose relentless toil made your very ability to relax and cleanse possible. So, beneath the gleaming marble and rushing water of a Roman bath lay the unseen, silent suffering of enslaved individuals, but for the Roman citizens. The baths were not just for cleansing and exercise. They were vibrant social hubs, often serving as centers for a variety of leisure activities, including the less reputable ones, leading to gambling and games dice, board games, betting, forget a quiet, dignified soak. The Roman baths were often alive with the clatter of dice and the murmur of wagers, adding another layer of vice and entertainment to the public experience. Imagine the atmosphere in the more public areas, perhaps near the Palaestra exercise yard or in the larger open halls. You'd find groups of men, and sometimes women, gathered around makeshift tables or even on the floor, deeply engrossed in various games of chance. The baths weren't just a place to get clean, they were a place to relax, socialize, and, for many, to test their luck. It's like a combination spa and casino. But with significantly less glitz and more public nudity, dice games were incredibly popular in ancient Rome, and the baths were no exception. Romans loved to gamble, and a simple set of dice tesserae could lead to hours of intense play and significant wagers. You might hear the excited shouts of winners, the frustrated grumbles of losers, and the constant clatter of the dice as they were thrown onto a board or directly onto the pavement. Imagine trying to concentrate on your workout while someone nearby is yelling about rolling a 666 or cursing their luck after a particularly bad throw. Beyond dice, various board games were also played. Games like Ludus Latrunculorum, a strategy game similar to chess or checkers or tabula. A backgammon-like game would provide a more intellectual form of entertainment. Though betting could certainly accompany these as well, these games provided a social outlet, a way to pass the time, and a means to engage in friendly or not-so-friendly competition. The omnipresent nature of betting meant that money, or goods, often changed hands. People would wager on the outcome of a dice roll, a game, or even on the performance of athletes in the palestra, while gambling was technically restricted by law at various times in Rome. These laws were often loosely enforced, especially in public spaces like the baths where discretion was hard to maintain. This aspect of bath culture reveals their role as true social centers, offering a wide range of activities beyond mere hygiene. For many Romans, visiting the baths was an entire afternoon or evening affair, combining exercise, bathing, socializing, and various forms of entertainment, including the thrill of a wager. One mainstream historical fact that supports the prevalence of gambling and games in Roman baths is the archaeological discovery of numerous dice, game pieces, and even graffiti indicating scores or wagers found within the ruins of Roman bath complexes across the empire. These artifacts directly confirm that gambling was a common and integrated activity within these spaces. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Roman bath complexes had small, dedicated rooms or alcoves specifically designed for gambling, sometimes featuring painted game boards on the floor or walls, suggesting that these activities were not just tolerated, but actively catered for. Imagine a little gaming nook within the spa, where you could lose your tunic as well as your dignity. It highlights how integral gambling was to the bath experience for some. Historians still argue whether the integration of gambling and games into Roman baths primarily served as a popular form of entertainment that increased the bath's social appeal and attendance, or if it contributed to moral decay, disputes, and financial ruin for many citizens, exacerbating societal problems. Did it add to the fun, or just to the vice regardless? Your visit to a Roman bath was not just about physical cleansing. It was an immersion into a lively, often raucous, world of leisure and chance, where the clatter of dice was as much a part of the atmosphere as the splashing of water. So, your visit to a Roman bath was an immersion into a lively, often raucous, world of leisure and chance, but beyond the games. The baths also offered a variety of personal care treatments, some of which were surprisingly rough and even painful, leading us to massage and hair removal rough treatments, questionable tools. Forget gentle aromatherapy and waxing strips. Roman beauty and grooming rituals, particularly those performed by professional attendants, could be quite intense, making your quest for smoothness a surprisingly uncomfortable affair. Imagine seeking a massage after a vigorous workout in the palestra exercise yard. While some massages might have been relaxing, many were likely quite vigorous, almost therapeutic in their intensity. Attendants, often slaves, would rub you down with various oils, olive oil being the most common, sometimes infused with herbs or perfumes. This wasn't just a gentle kneading. It could involve deep tissue work, pummeling, and stretching, designed to loosen muscles and promote circulation. Imagine being expertly kneaded by someone whose job it is to make sure you're properly pummeled before your bath. It's a very hands-on approach to wellness. Indeed. Then there was the often painful process of hair removal. For many Romans, especially men, body hair was considered unfashionable or even uncivilized. So, within the baths, you'd find specialized attendants, often referred to as alipoli or dropacistai, whose job it was to remove unwanted hair, and their methods not for the faint of heart. They might use tweezers volcellae to pluck out individual hairs, a slow and excruciating process, especially for larger areas. Imagine the sheer agony of having every single hair on your legs or chest meticulously pulled out one by one. It's enough to make you just embrace the natural look. Thank you very much. Another common method involved using a sticky resin or pitch. Similar to ancient waxing, this substance would be applied to the skin, allowed to cool and adhere to the hairs, and then ripped off, pulling the hairs from the root. Imagine the satisfying or terrifying rip as your hair, and perhaps a layer of skin, is suddenly removed. No wonder the phrase "no pain, no gain" probably originated here. These rough treatments and questionable tools highlight a different standard of comfort and pain tolerance. The pursuit of a smooth, hairless body was considered worth enduring significant discomfort. There were no soothing after oils or numbing creams to ease the pain. You simply endured it as part of the grooming ritual. While these services were available to those who could afford them, even the wealthy would experience this level of physical intensity. The desire to conform to societal norms of beauty and hygiene often outweighed the immediate discomfort of the process. One mainstream historical fact that confirms these practices is the discovery of various ancient Roman grooming tools, including bronze tweezers, valsellae, and razor-like blades, in archaeological excavations of Roman bath complexes and domestic sites. These artifacts provide tangible evidence of the methods used for hair removal and personal grooming. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that Roman literary sources, such as the poet Martial, occasionally mention the loud, shrill cries of bathers undergoing hair removal by a lapilli, suggesting that the process was so painful it often elicited public screams. Imagine trying to have a relaxing bath while someone in the next room is letting out yelps of pain as their body hair is being ripped off. It certainly adds to the noise and crowds experience we talked about earlier. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of these rough grooming practices primarily reflected a Roman aesthetic preference for smooth, hairless bodies, or if it was also a status symbol, with only the elite able to afford the time and attendance for such meticulous maintenance. Was it about beauty or social standing regardless? Your Roman bath visit was not just a place for cleansing and socializing. It was a site where the pursuit of beauty and hygiene often involved enduring surprisingly painful and decidedly unspa-like treatments. So, your Roman bath visit was a site where the pursuit of beauty often involved enduring surprisingly painful treatments. But beyond the personal grooming, some Roman baths, particularly the larger imperial complexes, offered a far more disturbing form of entertainment, bringing us to gladiatorial, animal fights, spectacles, bloodshed, cruelty. Forget a serene dip and a quiet chat. Certain bath complexes could also serve as venues for brutal, public displays of violence, making your visit a potential encounter with shocking brutality. Imagine that the very complex designed for your relaxation also housed arenas for deadly combat. While not every bath complex featured these, some of the grander imperial baths, or those near major amphitheaters, might have ancillary areas or adjacent facilities that staged such events. You might be walking out of a soothing hot bath and stumble upon a training ground for gladiators, or a smaller arena where animal fights were taking place. It's like leaving a yoga studio and immediately stepping into a UFC fight cage, a jarring transition. To say the least, gladiatorial spectacles, even on a smaller scale than the Colosseum, could occur, while full-scale gladiatorial contests were typically reserved for dedicated amphitheaters. Smaller displays, training bouts, or even fights to the death could be staged in the palaestra or other open areas of larger bath complexes, or in nearby, purpose-built arenas. These were public events, drawing crowds, and designed to entertain through combat. Imagine the clang of swords, the roar of the crowd, and the sight of blood, all within earshot of the bathing pools. Even more common, perhaps, were animal fights or hunts, wild beasts, lions, bears, wild boars, and other exotic creatures might be pitted against each other, or against human hunters, venatores. These venaciones beast hunts were incredibly popular and often gruesome, designed to showcase power and provide thrilling, bloody entertainment. Imagine the roars of agitated animals, the desperate cries, and the sight of carnage, all contributing to the unsettling atmosphere. It's like having a zoo that's also a fight club, and it's right next to your swimming pool. The sheer bloodshed and cruelty involved in these spectacles highlight a brutal aspect of Roman entertainment that starkly contrasts with our modern sensibilities of leisure and relaxation. For the Romans, witnessing death and violence was a form of entertainment, a testament to their martial culture and their desensitization to suffering. The integration of such brutal spectacles, even if adjacent or occasional, speaks to the multifaceted nature of Roman bath complexes. They weren't just places of hygiene, they were comprehensive entertainment centers, catering to a wide range of public tastes, from intellectual pursuits to visceral, bloody displays. One mainstream historical fact that supports the potential for such spectacles is the archaeological evidence of palaestri exercise grounds within many large Roman baths, which were used for athletic training and sometimes for public displays that could include combat or wrestling, hinting at the martial spirit that could extend to organized fights, even if not full-blown gladiatorial games. While not a direct arena, these spaces certainly hosted physically intense and sometimes violent activities. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Roman sources mention small, personal menageries or collections of exotic animals kept by wealthy Romans, and it's not inconceivable that some of these animals might have been used in private. Smaller-scale venations, beast hunts for entertainment within private villas or even smaller. More exclusive baths. Imagine your rich neighbor inviting you over for a spa day that ends with a bear fight in his backyard. It speaks to the extreme lengths Romans went for entertainment. Historians still argue whether the inclusion of such violent spectacles in or near Roman baths primarily reflected the widespread Roman public's demand for brutal entertainment, integrating it into daily leisure, or if it was a more localized phenomenon, confined to specific regions or imperial complexes, and not universally representative of the typical bathing experience. Were they common or an exception? Regardless, your visit to a Roman bath, depending on its location and scale, could unexpectedly expose you to the raw, visceral reality of Roman entertainment, turning your pursuit of relaxation into a confrontation with public bloodshed and unbridled cruelty. So, your visit to a Roman bath, depending on its location, could expose you to the raw, visceral reality of Roman entertainment and cruelty. But let's return to a more fundamental, if still disturbing, aspect of the bath's operation: human waste management sewer systems. Effluent discharge. Forget modern sewage treatment plants. While the Romans were pioneers in water engineering, their methods for dealing with human waste, particularly from the immense bath complexes, reveal a less-than-perfect system that still posed significant public health challenges. Imagine the sheer volume of human waste generated by thousands of people visiting a large bath complex daily. All those communal latrines, all those bodies, all those bodily fluids. It had to go somewhere. The Romans were famous for their sophisticated sewer systems, like the Cloaca Maxima in Rome, which drained the city's waste. Bath complexes were indeed connected to these systems. Waste from the latrines, and often the overflow from the bath pools themselves, would be channeled into underground conduits, It's like having a giant, ancient plumbing system, but without the benefit of germ theory or environmental regulations. However, the where was the crucial, and often disturbing, part effluent discharge. These sewer systems, while impressive, typically discharge directly into rivers, streams, or the sea, often downstream from where fresh water was drawn for drinking or other purposes. This meant that while waste was removed from the immediate vicinity of the baths and urban centers, it was simply relocated to pollute natural water sources. Imagine the sheer volume of raw sewage flowing directly into the Tiber River or other bodies of water, which local populations might still use for fishing, washing, or even indirectly for consumption. The constant flow of water through the bath complexes, while impressive, also meant that any contaminants not immediately carried away could linger. The open channels beneath the latrines, as we discussed, were not perfectly sealed, and odors and potential splashback were realities. Gases from the sewers, while usually vented, could occasionally become problematic. Furthermore, the very design of the baths, with their large, stagnant pools, even if periodically refreshed, and the direct connection to waste disposal, meant that these magnificent structures, despite their clean appearance, were intricate parts of a broader urban environment that was far from sanitized. The lack of understanding about the link between contaminated water and disease meant that their impressive engineering did not fully mitigate the public health risks inherent in their waste management practices. One mainstream historical fact that supports this system of discharge is the well-documented Roman practice of direct sewage discharge into natural waterways, with the Cloaca Maxima famously emptying into the Tiber River. This engineering feat, while a marvel for its time, was designed for removal, not for purification, of waste. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Roman cities had public latrines, often part of bath complexes, which incorporated small shrines or images to the goddess Fortuna or a specific deity, asking for good fortune or perhaps protection from the less pleasant aspects of bodily functions. Imagine having a little prayer offering next to you as you contemplate the raw sewage flowing beneath your seat. It highlights the human desire for divine intervention, even in the most mundane and gross of circumstances. Historians still argue whether the Roman sewer systems and waste management practices primarily contributed to a relatively healthy urban environment for their time by removing visible waste, or if their ultimate discharge methods into natural waters created significant ecological damage and perpetuated widespread waterborne diseases over the long term. Were they a triumph of hygiene or an environmental disaster regardless? Your visit to a Roman bath, even in its most splendid form, was inextricably linked to a colossal system of human waste management, where the daily cleansing rituals of thousands meant an equally colossal, and often disturbing, discharge into the natural world. So, your visit to a Roman bath was inextricably linked to a colossal system of human waste management and its less than ideal discharge. And amidst all these very real, tangible issues of hygiene and crime, the Roman bath experience was also deeply intertwined with the intangible, often unsettling, world of superstitions and curses, bathing rituals, votive offerings. Forget just getting clean. For many Romans, visiting the baths involved navigating a complex web of ancient beliefs, seeking divine favor, or, more darkly, invoking supernatural vengeance. Imagine stepping into the bath complex, perhaps a new one, or one where you feel a sense of unease, beyond the practicalities of cleansing. Many Romans harbored deep beliefs about the supernatural, and public spaces, especially those associated with water and health, were seen as places where divine forces could be appeased or invoked. It's like going to a modern spa, But everyone is performing little rituals, whispering prayers, and maybe burying tiny, ominous-looking dolls under the changing room floor. Bathing rituals often transcended mere physical cleansing. For some, the act of bathing itself was imbued with religious significance, a purification not just of the body but also of the soul. Certain pools or springs, particularly those associated with natural mineral waters, were considered sacred, possessing healing properties bestowed by the gods. You might observe bathers performing specific gestures, reciting silent prayers, or making offerings before or after their immersion, hoping to gain favor or ward off illness. Then there were the votive offerings. These were small objects, often miniature representations of body parts like a pair of eyes, a leg, or an internal organ, or simple lead plaques, left at sacred springs or within the bath complexes. People would leave these offerings as thanks for healing, or as a plea for a cure from an ailment. Imagine seeing a little collection of tiny bronze arms and legs near a particularly hot spring, left by people hoping for a miraculous recovery. It's a very literal way to pray for health. More disturbingly, the baths were also a popular place for casting curses. As we briefly touched upon when discussing theft, numerous curse tablets de ficciones have been found in Roman baths. These were small lead sheets, inscribed with a curse often written backwards or in the strange script invoking chthonic deities or spirits to inflict harm upon someone. The curses were often highly specific, punishing a thief who stole a bather's tunic, or invoking illness upon arrival in love or business. The idea was that the water, being a conduit to the underworld, would carry the curse to its intended target. Imagine someone secretly dropping a tiny, intricately folded lead sheet into the bathwater, cursing you for taking their favorite spot in the caldarium. It's a very petty, yet terrifying, form of ancient retribution. This integration of deep-seated superstitions and fears into the daily routine of bathing reveals a society that navigated a thin line between the rational and the mystical. For the Romans, the baths were not just architectural marvels, they were powerful, liminal spaces where the earthly realm met the divine, and where unseen forces could be influenced. For good or ill, one mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates this is the discovery of hundreds, if not thousands, of de fiction's curse tablets specifically in Roman bath complexes and springs across the Roman Empire. These archaeological finds are direct, tangible evidence of the widespread practice of inscribing and depositing curses in places associated with water and healing, demonstrating the profound role of superstition. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some de fictiones found in baths were so detailed that they even named the specific type of stolen garment, e.g., my white tunic with purple stripes, or described physical attributes of the suspected thief, showing the depth of anger and desire for supernatural vengeance. Imagine losing your favorite swimsuit and then going to a witch to put a curse on the person who took it. It's a very human, if extreme, reaction. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of curses and votive offerings in Roman baths primarily reflected a genuine belief in supernatural intervention for health and justice, or if these practices were largely a psychological coping mechanism for people living in a world without modern medicine or effective policing. Were they true faith, or just desperate acts, regardless? Your visit to a Roman bath was not just a physical experience, it was an immersion into a world where every splash could carry a prayer, a plea for healing, or the chilling whisper of a very real and very ancient curse. So, your visit to a Roman bath was an immersion into a world where every splash could carry a prayer, or the chilling whisper of a very ancient curse. This array of services, from the mundane to the mystical, ultimately made the baths not just a daily option, but an unavoidable part of Roman life, leading us to the bath habit addiction. Daily routine, social pressure, forget a casual visit for Romans. Bathing evolved into a deeply ingrained cultural practice, a compelling daily ritual that exerted immense social influence, making it almost impossible to avoid. Imagine Roman society. You are a citizen. Your day, from the crack of dawn, is structured around the rhythms of the city, and a significant part of that rhythm revolved around the baths. For many, going to the baths was as essential as eating or sleeping, almost an addiction in the cultural sense. It wasn't just about getting clean, it was about connecting, exercising, relaxing, and seeing and being seen. It's like the ancient Roman equivalent of a gym membership, a social club, and a local pub all rolled into one, and everyone you know expects you to be there. The daily routine for most Romans, particularly in urban centers, often culminated in a visit to the baths in the late afternoon. You might start your day with business, followed by a light lunch, and then head to the palestra for exercise, finishing with the full bathing cycle, the frigidarium, tepidarium, and caldarium. This was a set schedule, a predictable rhythm that defined social life. Imagine the awkwardness if you consistently skipped this central social event. The social pressure to attend the baths was immense. They were the primary public meeting places, centers of gossip, political discussion, business networking, and casual entertainment. If you wanted to stay informed, make connections, or simply be part of the community, you had to be there. Not showing up might suggest you were poor, ill, or simply antisocial, potentially damaging your reputation and opportunities. Imagine missing out on all the crucial city news because you decided to just wash up at home. That's a very fast way to become socially irrelevant. The sheer accessibility also contributed to this habit. Baths were numerous, found in every Roman town, and incredibly cheap. Often just 1 quadrans the smallest Roman coin, or even free due to donations from wealthy patrons or emperors. This made them available to virtually everyone, solidifying their place as a universal daily ritual. For many, the bath habit was a genuine pleasure, a highlight of their day. For others, perhaps those of lower status who cleaned the baths or were subjected to their less pleasant aspects, it was simply part of the relentless grind of urban life. But regardless of your personal enjoyment, the baths were an inescapable fixture of Roman society, exerting a powerful pull on daily life. One mainstream historical fact that supports the widespread bath habit is the sheer ubiquity and vast scale of Roman bath complexes across the entire Roman Empire. From grand imperial baths in Rome to smaller, privately run establishments in provincial towns, their presence in virtually every Roman settlement demonstrates their fundamental role in daily Roman life. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Roman emperors or wealthy individuals would occasionally offer free admission to the baths for specific days or events, sometimes even providing free oil or strigils, further cementing the habit by making it even more accessible and attractive to the masses. Imagine a free bath day where even the soap is on the house. It's an ancient form of public relations. Historians still argue whether the bath habit primarily represented a sophisticated public health initiative that genuinely improved the hygiene and well-being of Roman citizens, or if its social and recreational functions were paramount, with hygiene serving more as a justification for a beloved, often indulgent, daily ritual. Was it about health, or just hanging out regardless? Your life as a Roman citizen would be inextricably linked to the grand, noisy, sometimes disturbing, but utterly captivating world of the public baths, a daily immersion into the very heart of Roman society. Now, let the echoes of splashing water, the distant shouts, and the lingering scents of oil and sweat gently recede into the distant past. The grand marble halls dissolve, the cacophony of voices softens, and the unsettling images of shared scrapers and communal latrines fade into a blurring memory. There's no more navigating crowds of naked strangers, no more worries about pickpockets, and no more silent gambles against unseen germs. Just the quiet hum of your fan, the soft comfort of your bed, and the profound stillness of the night. You can release the imagined burdens of those disturbing Roman baths, the questionable hygiene, the social complexities, and the occasional jarring encounter. That vibrant, sometimes unsettling, world of ancient cleansing belongs to history, not to your peaceful present. Drift now into a deep, untroubled rest. Sweet dreams.